Did you send it to me here on Discord or Twitter? Okay. Cool. Yeah, dude, I love any kind of synthwave, man. Yeah. Right, right.
Aho, minasan, Bloody Nux here, aka Cool Casio. How you doing, bro?
I'm doing good, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing absolutely phenomenal today. And I'm so glad that we finally got a chance to sit down and talk because me and you have been planning this for a minute now. Originally, me and Michael here were actually talking about doing an interview last year before your last project went live. After a very successful Kickstarter fund, which was your project Flesh Made Fear. I was like, and that was last October. I believe you actually were super excited because that launched on Halloween for you.
Right, right, right.
So that was when me and him were originally planning it, and then things just kind of happened. He got busy, I got busy, but we made it happen. And since then, man takes no time to rest because we're going to talk about his newest project that is currently in the works, the Skin Stapler. I gotta say this. I don't know what's up with you devs. I was like, especially between you and Jordan King of Puppet Combo, y'all have this fascination of like, you know what? Let's make a game about someone who's obsessed with human skin.
Right. I think it's just like probably our mutual love for Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
I mean,
To be honest.
to be fair, coming from our generation, because I know you are of the older millennial persuasion as much as I am here. I was like, that was kind of one of the foundations of horror back in our back growing up, you know, in the late '80s, early '90s, and all that. But
Right.
between that, obviously, we had as much of a comedy as it is at the same time. I was like, you even had stuff like Leprechaun had some pretty insane stuff too. So just kind of seeing that love and appreciation for classics and over the top, right? Kind of
Right.
goriness that's just like so eccentric that it kind of makes it like semi scary, but also kind of just like ridiculous. I was like,
Yeah, I mean,
go
I
ahead.
definitely like love. I like definitely love like the horror movies that kind of like lean into a little bit of comedy with it as well. You know, like the Leprechaun's a perfect example of that. You know, you got this little fucking gremlin dude running around killing people in like a very like you know gory way or very extreme way, but then he's like cracking jokes while he's doing it, right? So
Oh yeah.
I love that shit.
Oh yeah, I was like, and that's probably one of the most entertaining things about horror is that you can have the pure traditional horror, right? And depending on what how you want to look at that, you can have the unending dread and kind of like suspiciousness of something like The Thing, right? I was like, yeah, it's
Hmm.
body horror and you have Alien, but it's the fact of that you can't trust anyone around you, so it's that impending dread and suspicion. Or you can have that traditional horror of being stalked. You have things like Halloween, you have Friday the
Right.
13th, like you mentioned, there's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I was like, always something to that. But then you can also have something that's over the top and hilarious, and not take itself seriously, but still be creepy enough in its aspects. And that's where you get things like Leprechaun, and hell, people don't ever want to acknowledge it, but I mean, even Gremlins. Gremlins is technically a horror comedy.
Right. Yeah,
So,
there's some really like graphic stuff in Gremlins.
oh yeah, I mean, look at half the shenanigans those little things, those little shits get into, right? I was like, and
Right.
how they just mutilate themselves. I mean, look at what was it? I think it was in Gremlins 1 when you see them like in the kitchen and you're seeing them stick a fork in the toaster and just shock the
Yeah.
ever living shit out of themselves and just get electrocuted and start laughing about it.
Doesn't the mother like shove one of them into a blender or something like
Yeah, the
that?
mother. I was like, the mother shoves one into a blender, and then that's not even to mention like when they were all playing poker and just started shooting each other, and I'm just like, what, what,
Right.
what's going on? I was
Yeah.
like, so it's one of those things with that Gremlins. Yeah, it's not rated R and extremely graphic or anything like that, but it's still the fact of that it was one of those horror comedies, and the fact that was a little extreme for the rating that it had.
Exactly. I mean, you don't always have to have like extreme gore to like get the point across, right?
Mm-hmm. I was like, and I think that's the fact is that people. I was like, that's what makes horror so unique is that you have so many subgenres of it
Right.
that you don't always need one over the other, because you can have a really good horror without having unnecessary or overly extensive gore. I mean, hell, look at one of the most recent films that a lot of people love. Look at Hereditary, right? I was like,
Right.
did not go the way that people expected it. Completely had it subverted all expectations. There's all of maybe two like death scenes in the entire movie, right? And even
Mm-hmm.
one of them, as graphic as it wasn't shown, was completely off screen. But it's the fact of that you knew what was going on, and it didn't need to give it to you, and it made you feel a certain way. And I think that's
Right.
where what goes to show is that you don't need to be graphic for it to be unnerving, right?
Right. Yeah, sometimes you can just let the imagination fill in the blanks, right? And not like focus so much on just giving like spoon feeding everything to the viewer. So I mean, it's a it's good both ways. Like sometimes it's really like if you really want to shock somebody, right? Then you have like this extremely grotesque gore filled scene, right? But like if you want to kind of let people, I don't know, explore what possibly could be happening, then maybe you cut away and then just have like sound effects or just imply what's happening, and that can sometimes be even more effective than showing it.
Yeah, and I think that's what people don't need. I'm not gonna say that they don't understand. I'm just saying I think that people are starting to really appreciate more nowadays. Is that there's so many unique ways to present horror,
Right.
and in your games you explored a lot of that. I was like, you have your flesh made horror, right? I was like, you have your zombie style old school kind of horror. I was like, and then you have your very gratuitous and over the top horror
Yeah.
with one of your last projects, and probably one of my favorites, which was Massacre at the Mirage. I was like,
Hell yeah.
and that one honestly felt like Terrifier in a movie theater. I was like, because everything was revolving around this one crazy clown just killing everyone. That was
I mean,
simply
that's pretty much how it started, to be honest. It's like I wanted to make a Terrifier fan game, and obviously I couldn't like release that because of IP, so I kind of just like skirted the
skirted those copyright lines.
right, skirted the line, made him look slightly different and stuff like that. But
Instead of like
heavily
a
inspired by
traditional
him.
clown, you went more Harlequin with it.
Yeah, he's like a mime as opposed to a clown, right? So you can't
Mhm.
really compare the two of being clowns. I just was like, okay, well, I want to make him look like art, but I'm going to make him look a little bit different. So it's obviously, and like I was trying to lean heavily into like the parody aspect of it, but I'm like right there with you. Like that was fully my intentions with that game. Was like I want to make it like a Terrifier inspired game.
And it came off really really well. And I find it funny is that you had that little bit of early tease with the demo before, which was more of a simulator because you're just like, maybe people don't want to go in with the full crazy horror aspect of it. You had, what was it called, Manny's Murderous Movie Theater, where it's just focusing
Right.
on one of the small aspects of the game is where you're working in a movie theater, so you're selling people tickets, bringing them in, and then you're serving them snacks inside the movie theater before they go off and do thing, and you're jumping around a lot in that game from many different characters
Right.
perspectives on everything that was going on. So I found it very interesting because not only did you have a core character in that game, it also kind of was semi anthology because of the fact that you were having so many different short stories between these different characters going on around this one location with this one killer.
Yeah, well, I was really trying to just recreate the like a slasher movie kind of thing going on where like you watch old slasher movies and it's constantly switching perspectives to different characters as they're getting killed off one by one. So I was really just like, okay, well, I want to make that but into a video game. So you know when you're doing something like that, you're just like, am I making a video game or I'm just making like an interactive movie? Right, so the whole like simulation side with the theater is kind of just putting some kind of gameplay in there so that I could wrap it around this like slasher movie that I really wanted to just make, which was switching perspectives and letting people get killed off one by one.
And you know what? I think that that's perfectly okay because even now we see more horror games and some of them having these like very small or minor like uh, simulator aspects. I mean, look at a lot of the Korean horror games that have come out, Japanese horror games, and even just indie games coming out, like the late night
Mhm.
shifts, right? Working in a convenience store, and you're just an everyday, store clerk. Hey, go stack the shelves. Hey, go clean up this mess. All this, that, and then the creepy stuff starts happening. So I definitely think that
Right.
you took that very minimal feel of hey, look, here's gameplay, quote unquote, right? of
Exactly.
what you're doing in a movie theater. What are you gonna do? Sell tickets and serve popcorn and
Right.
drinks. I was like, so you had that just right to then match with the tone and setting of everything. But you also had some unique puzzles and everything in there, kind of sprinkled throughout. Um, with these different interactions for all these characters. And you had some very very cool death scenes in that game. I'm not gonna lie. Obviously the radio show was probably one of my favorites when I saw that one play
Right.
out.
Yeah, that I think that was probably like my favorite as well, to be honest, in that game.
Yeah, I was like that one was so well done. And it I just found it funny because you had the radio host, which was the girl, I can't remember her name. I was like, she was friends with your quote unquote main character that a lot of this
Hmm.
centered around, and then you had her producer who was out there helping with the show. So you had two very unique deaths with that, because you also had the way that she was interacting with your serial killer, hitting on him and
Yeah.
everything else. I'm just like, girl, calm down. I was like, that's a red
Right.
flag if I ever see one. But I'm just like, rule number one of horror movies is don't be horny, right?
Right.
And she obviously did not catch that, memo.
Right. I mean, that's what you kind of got to do when you're trying to like simulate the like the campy horror styles, right? All these characters are like exaggerated versions of what like real humans would be, right? To just kind of like play into the tropes and the cliches, because that's what people find entertaining, and it's like it's kind of like nostalgic um to certain people who like grew up with that genre, and they're like, oh, okay, it's a callback to a very specific style of like movies that came out in a very specific period of time, like the 80s, 90s, and stuff like that. So it's a little bit of nostalgia bait, but it's totally fine as long as it's done right, and it's something that like feels authentic. Like I think people can appreciate it and not kind of take it as like oh, I'm trying to use it as a way to get more people to play the game, or like I don't know, just as a trap or any kind of like selling point for the game, right?
Yeah, and it definitely comes off because you had so many very unique tropes in there that if like you said, grew up with that era of films, you kind of get, like you said, I was like, we have the main character who notices all this weird shit's going on and tries to
Hmm.
say something about it, and try to tell her boss. But guess what, we have the bumbling idiotic boss that's just like, no, no, everything's perfectly fine, just focus on
Right,
doing your
right,
job. And then in the end, I was like, oh, hey, look, he wasn't so useless and too much of an idiot, but it always comes too late before he decides to listen. So I'm just like, oh yeah,
right,
that's as 90s as it can possibly be.
right. Yeah.
I was like, so speaking of with everything with Massacre at the Mirage, you left off on a very unique cliffhanger of an ending.
Hmm.
Is that where you're gonna leave it, or is there any thoughts about maybe doing something a little bit more with that, seeing what you can do?
There's ideas being kicked around. Like I haven't really settled on anything specific, but like I have some ideas that I'm cooking up that obviously if they actually become something, then I probably have more to say about it, but I don't want to like say anything right now because it's like 50-50 up in the air if it's going to be something I actually do or not. So kind of but I definitely have ideas and on how the story could continue, even if it's not like a direct sequel, but maybe more of a prequel or something like that, where we get some background on Manny, who's the mime or something like that,
Yeah.
or
I was like,
um,
and that's perfectly fine. I was like, sometimes a cliffhanger ending to just let everyone kind of think for the next forever is always fun. But sometimes I was like, that was a hell of a twist that you came after everything, and I'm just like, oh, that's so wrong. So I'm just like,
right.
I need to know what happens next. I was like, I need more. I was like,
Yeah,
you
I'm
can't
not
do.
a huge fan of happy endings.
Hey, some I was like, in horror, does anyone ever have a happy ending?
Right.
So I mean, it's a par for the course, or at least if someone does have a happy ending, it comes with a lot of trauma involved.
Right. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's like what we are talking about earlier. It's like sometimes it's better to just like leave things open ended, or don't explain things, or give like a concrete end, because it just allows for whoever's playing the game, or if you're watching a movie, the viewer to kind of just sit in their own mind about what they just watched or what the possibilities of something. It's like watching The Thing, right? Like if John Carpenter gave you a direct conclusion at the end of The Thing, then there wouldn't be fucking, tons and tons of videos online about people trying to figure out, oh, who was actually infected at the end. Was anybody infected? Like, what happened? What happens next after that? Like, did anyone make it out alive? Is anybody getting rescued? Was it all for nothing? So it's like, sometimes it's really good to just, you know, leave things open ended
Yeah.
and just let people explore things on their own.
And I mean, the only like any sort of confirmation that we got with that, right, is the fact of that they made what was it, the thing video game? I was like, that technically
Hmm.
acted as a prequel to the movie, and talking about how the original base where the thing was at and everything that happened there before it escaped as the dog that we
Right.
found chasing at the beginning of the film. So I'm just like, that's fine. I was like, because you're just adding into it. I was like, but you're not taking away from the ending that people are still talking about, 30, 40 years
Right.
later.
Right. Right. Yeah.
I was like, and I think that that's what can sometimes be a good experience if everything up to that, has a good payoff and you leave it like that, then it works, right?
Yeah.
And
Why would you? Why would you want to destroy what you know is already really awesome to begin with? I mean, I understand Hollywood does that all the time. They just obviously to just cash in, right? They'll fucking take something and remake it or add a sequel just because like they see dollar signs, right? And at the end of the day, fucking, cash rules everything.
yeah,
Um, so that happens, and when it does happen, it sucks. But like, I think as far as like John Carpenter goes, like obviously he never wanted to expand upon it and kind of like ruin his initial vision of the ending or anything like that. So I don't think he would ever willingly want to make a sequel or even explain the end. I know he's been asked about it multiple times, and he never gives anybody like a definitive answer about what happens after that or who is infected at the end. So I think he understands what he did, and it's kind of just completely intentional, right?
yeah, and sometimes that's where the beauty is he's like, you can build the universe, but don't go past where that end point is. Like that's why it says, like, I think the game was unique in that it was a prequel and talked about everything up to, but it didn't
Hmm.
change the ending that we know, and it just
Right, right,
added to it, and that's why I think that can be a really unique way of approaching things, is expanding the universe, but in the opposite direction. What came before? Where did we? What happened to
right.
get to where we were, and how it ended that we know. So sometimes adding that little bit of beforehand than after is a better way to approach things.
Yeah, or you could just do something that's completely standalone, that's separate from that original story, but still takes place in the same universe, right? That works too as well. Like, so it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to be like an exact prequel to that like leads up to the original story. It could be, like if I was to make Massacre at the Mirage 2 and I wanted it to be like a sequel, like I could take the story somewhere else with new characters and not necessarily just like pick up right where the first one left off, right? So there's different options creatively speaking when you're trying to like come up with stories and everything where you don't have to like necessarily um, dilute or kind of mess up the original story. If you're doing like a sequel or a prequel, you can kind of just leave that alone as its own standalone creation, and then whatever you're making on top of that can be a completely separate story that takes place within the same canon universe, right? So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And I agree. I was like, and you definitely kind of jumped across those different genres and telling of the way that you approach horror. And if anyone has checked out any of your games, I was like, they can see you have that nostalgia feel. You have that old school horror aspect, like we mentioned about Massacre being
Hmm.
really that kind of old school slasher. But one of your real old school slasher feels was actually Terror at Oakheart. I was like, and
Right.
that one you really wanted it to be like 80s 90s kind of focused feel, and it definitely shows off. But you also had a very unique one, which is actually one of the first games that got me into a lot of what you did, and probably one of your earliest projects, which was Suffer the Night, which I thought
Right.
was a very, very well done horror experience, because the fact that it's like all within a video game, but also like it's not. It's like all haunted because of this entity. uh,
Right.
was a very unique take, right? And coming from, obviously, we know all about haunted objects. Look at The Ring and all of those. Like, hey, you play this, you watch this, you do this, you're cursed, right? So to kind of
Hmm.
have that experience the way that you did was so well done. Um, and for the demo, when you put out for that demo was a lengthy demo before you put out the full game, and
Yeah.
that was like a good hour and a half, almost 2 hour experience, and then the full game takes place right after everything you did in the demo. So I thought
Right.
that was so well done to use that entire prologue to set up for everything that was coming after.
Yeah. Start for the Night was was definitely like me trying to make like an actual horror game. You know, like Terra Oakheart, Massacre at the Mirage, even like right now with the Skin Stapler, and even aspects of Flesh Made Fear. They're all like I definitely like leaning in on like satire. You know, kind of just trying to make it, kind of like a horror comedy and stuff like that. But Stuff for the Night was definitely like me trying to make something scary and just scary, not necessarily have any kind of tongue in cheek jokes going on or any stuff like that. It was like a very serious tone, and just generally try to scare people. So
And you did so well with that. I was like, from the environments to the storytelling throughout, it was well done. And I also like the fact of that you had probably one of the most involved, like, for those who like actually like looking around and like trying to find all the secrets to get the quote unquote good ending. I was like, that one
hmm
was actually like, you had to actually work for it, and I like that,
right, right,
because the ending that most people are gonna get, if they're not checking every corner and really utilizing, um, what was it, that the the tool that you had to look through to find hidden objects. I was like,
yeah. The little like camera system that I built where you could like listen to audio tapes and stuff on it.
yes, I was like, that very
Right.
unique like audiogram that it was. I was like, man, that's such a cool idea on how you use that, and I loved it because it was almost like a different. It was almost like a an EMF reader, electromagnetic frequencies, but mixed
Hmm.
with like a camera system that you would see in something like Fatal Frame, right? I was like, the way that you
Right.
would track items and objects and even certain enemies at a certain point. I thought that was so cool. Um, but the fact is that if you weren't utilizing it outside of, oh, I just got to do this quick puzzle, that ending twist was so
Right.
great. It was so well done. I was like, so I'm just like, all right, that is cool. When I first got that ending, and I'm just like, son of a bitch. So, and I was just like, I was looking, and I'm just like, where did I miss one? Where was it? Because I
Right. You
know,
gotta really look around to find everything for
yeah,
sure.
because I got to the end, and I think I had like 11 out of the 12 like tarot cards or something like that, and I'm just like,
Hmm.
huh. I was like, oh, hey, look, they're all here now that you collected throughout the game. And I was like, and I'm just like, all right, well, I don't think that that's anything important. And just kind of kept going on. And it's like, no, no, that all tied into which ending you got.
Right. Right.
So for
Yeah,
the,
I know that like it probably upset a few people because like you accidentally a lot of people just like to beat it and then just be able to go back and get the second ending like really easily. But you know, I wanted people to work for a little bit, but I could see how it would be like frustrating to some people. So it's kind of like a little bit of a risky kind of play to do something like that. But honestly, it was like my first published game, so I really didn't know what the hell I was doing. And like as far as like trying to develop like a more pleasant um, player experience, I've definitely learned more and more things over time with more and more releases about just trying to make a game that's overall just a like a pleasant experience to play and not feel like a slog or anything like that where you're just going through the motions to get to the end of the game.
yeah. And I definitely think that it has shown over time with everything that you're doing. You've seen that transition, like you said. You've seen more involvement with with satire and the way that you approach different genres and different mechanics and how you actually make the gameplay consistently change. And I thought that was what was so cool about Flesh Made Fear,
Mm.
because that one, yes, it was definitely satire, but not only that, but that entire game was your big love letter to old school retro survival horror, talking,
Right.
Silent Hill, Resident Evil, the classics that really inspired it. And even
Hmm.
even with some of those games, and we've seen that genre, that old retro style survival horror, fixed cameras and everything coming back. There are some that are very, hey, you know what, we're gonna go all in on the horror, or there's some that are like campy with it, and I think that yours had a real nice balance between the two.
Thank you. That's pretty much what I was going for. Trying to make something that was not like, like I really wanted to do Resident Evil 1 essentially, where like it's unintentionally funny, right? But in
Yeah,
like in a very genuine kind of I don't know, like lighthearted way where it's not like it's so bad it's good kind of a situation, right?
yeah, and sometimes
you know.
that's what's great, and we joke about, Resident Evil 1 to this day, is that the story and the atmosphere, everything is intense, it is dread filled, it is horror. It's just the
Mm.
writing is what's the campiness about it, and sometimes it's the way the characters interact. Like, everyone still talks about the Jill sandwich and everything else. It's
Right.
like, oh, Barry. I was like, yeah. I was like, it's writing like that that makes it uncharacteristically funny, which makes it enjoyable when you're trying to be this
Exactly.
serious horror thing. And what you capture with Flesh Made Fear really had that 90s, you know, uh, dabble to it, and that's what I made it appreciative of my experience with the game.
Yeah, I think most people probably pick up on that. Obviously, like the voice acting in the original Resident Evil is very campy, you know. And that's definitely something I wanted to try to recreate. So I specifically was telling like all the voice actors like let's fucking camp it up. Like I don't want anybody to have like a super serious tone about what they're doing. Like this is a fun project. Like let's really kind of just lean into the satire aspects of like the voice acting from Resident Evil 1 because that's what I really want to try to capture if I can. Obviously, it's not going to be one to one because I think one of the big aspects of why that voice acting and the writing in RE1 is so hilariously awesome is because, it was created in Japan and there's like obviously some stuff getting lost in translation there when, there's Japanese writers trying to imitate how Americans would act and stuff like that, right? And then you got
Mm-hmm.
the original voice actors were, kind of just hired randomly on the spot. They weren't like industry standard voice actors or anything like that. So it was a
Right.
very unique approach that kind of created this little a unique experience with that aspect of the game. So it's not something that would be easy to recreate, but like I could definitely try to be inspired by it, right? So
Oh yeah.
that's pretty much what I tried to
The only thing that was missing was more one-liners. I was like, that era had
do.
more one-liners. That's like fighting
Right.
a dead body that only has or a zombie that only has one leg, and the main character's like, well, I guess he didn't have a leg to stand on.
Right, right.
Like, all serious about the delivery, like deadpan it. I was like, but you're just
Well,
like,
that's pretty much what I'm doing in the skin stapler. Is I'm leaning heavily into Dick Slater has all kinds of one-liners that you'll hear throughout the full release. So uh, yeah, I definitely I picked that up, and I want to definitely add that into this next project.
all right, well, that's good. That's awesome to hear. I was like, so no, knowing where you've kind of experimented with everything, going up with a lot of the few games that you've worked on over the years, because
Mhm.
you've been very busy since you started doing this, because
Yeah.
you've put out almost one game every year. So like every few months you had a different one coming out. Because starting with Suffer the Night in what, 2013, you had about a year later was Terra at Oakheart, and then almost 6 months after that you had Massacre at the Mirage. The only
Yeah.
big the only big jump was almost exactly a year on the dot, was from Massacre to Flesh Made Fear.
Yeah. Yeah, Flesh Made Fear was a much larger project. It's like an actual game. Like you look at Massacre, you look at Terra Okart, even like the Skin Stapler, like mechanically speaking, they're pretty simple games, right? It's just more of like a narrative, story driven, like walking sim. But Flesh Made Fear, it has all kinds of mechanics going in, like with the inventory system, the combat system, the save system, and then you have like all the AI on top of that. Um, so that was a much more intense game to program and create. So it definitely took I had to take much longer to create that game than my other projects. But yeah, I mean, like I just like to stay busy. Like I love my job. I love working on games. I love being creative. So it doesn't really feel like too much of a job to me. If it's just it feels like I'm doing what I want to do in life, which is be creative.
And sometimes that's all it is just like having fun, enjoying creating. I think in this industry, right, I think that the most fun comes from the sense of creation, or just the process of creation. I was like, that's where you really can kind of experiment and really throw out um, everything that you want to do, and try to just be as unique with it as you can, right? I like, so the
Yeah.
fact that you've kept yourself busy, be saying that, hey, you know what, you put out four, almost five projects in the past 3 years, is crazy to think about, right? Uh,
Yeah.
so with the Skin Stapler, I know you said that you're kind of more leaning into back into that kind of campiness and that grindhouse style, over the top.
Mhm.
Is there still going to be a lot of like in very involved gameplay like Flesh Made Fear, or is it going to be kind of similar to more Massacre or Terrado Kart, where it's a little bit, you know, not as heavy with mechanics and gameplay?
No, it's definitely more towards like Massacre, I would say, with like simulation sections mixed in with light puzzle elements and stuff like that. It's kind of just more of a like a interactive story, right? Because honestly, after I finished Flesh Made Fear, it was a very labor intensive project. So after I finished that, I really wanted to just kind of take it easy and make something that was going to be kind of fun and funny for me to make. So this the Skin Stapler is for definitely for fans of like Massacre and Terror, right? And then after I finish the Skin Stapler, then I might lean back into something that's more like for the fans of Flesh Made Fear, right? Because I like to switch it up when I'm making my games, whether it be artistically speaking or gameplay mechanics wise. I just like to once I do one project, like I'm usually pretty burnt out on that specific style, so then I'll switch it up to something else just to keep things fresh. But that doesn't mean I'm not against going back to that style. So that's exactly what I'm doing with the Skin Stapler. It's like I made Flesh Made Fear, which was something completely different, like mechanically speaking. But
Mm-hmm.
after I finished Flesh Made Fear, like I'm burnt out on that style, so I'm going back to like Massacre at the Mirage kind of style because that's something a lot of people really liked and obviously want to play some more of that. So kind
Oh,
of just
oh yeah, I think
giving the
definitely.
fans what they want.
I definitely know that a lot of people really came to really recognize you after Massacre at the Mirage, because I
Yeah.
know I know a lot of people, and especially a lot of larger content creators, really loved and praised Stuff for the Night being one of your first projects and stuff like that,
Hmm.
because you had YouTubers like, John Wolf, obviously being one of the biggest names in the horror space on content creation. You had people like CJU and others really play through and love those games, and it was actually because of them playing the demo is actually what caught my attention to for me, that actually ended up checking it out myself,
Yeah.
and being able to get a copy of it to play through, and after that I think that was shortly before Terra Kart, and that's what kind of got me following you too. So it's like your style was always so different that there's always a little something for everyone. So I know that there's people who would probably want something more involved, like Suffer the Night or Flesh Made Fear. But I also think that
Hmm.
those smaller projects that you were doing with like Terror and Massacre, having those kind of break it up is always fun, because even when you're trying to break away from the involved style, you always do a different genre, like Tarot Kart being more side scroller, pixel, like
Right.
1632-bit style game, before going into that simulation with Massacre. And then of course you had the first person survival of Suffer the Night, and then he went
Mhm.
straight, you know, PS1, old school tank control, fixed cameras, retro horror with Flesh Made Fear, and then now you're going to everything that you're doing with the Skin Stapler, which is back to that kind of simulation, first person kind of
Right.
look and aesthetic. So the fact that you also don't try to, like you said, keep yourself in the same vein artistically, you're always jumping from something to try something else, it really kind of shows on why all this stands out.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I mean, like, I think it's nice to keep things fresh, and like, if you're just making the same thing over and over again, like I could see how that would start to just feel not like as creatively satisfying or fulfilling, you know. So it's good to explore different styles artistically, or different game mechanics, or just maybe different ways of telling stories, just to keep things fresh, and also just to learn, like, just keep expanding my tool set by putting myself in situations where I have to create new mechanics that I've never done before, and just try to figure out how to make them, because there's no like step by step guide on how to make like a retro style PSX Resident Evil 1 inspired game. There's definitely stuff out there that'll help you get started, but like if you want to make it like uh, exactly like how it should be, or if you're really trying to stay true to the look and feel of that style, there's nothing out there that's really gonna like teach you, from start to finish. And on top of that, you have to like come up with your own story for it and everything like that. So um, it's nice to get like to put myself into uncomfortable situations to make me grow as a dev creatively and technically. So that's honestly like why I do those things, is because I like to grow and not just be kind of stuck in that. Like, I know there's nothing wrong with um some devs just like finding their thing and then just sticking to that and just keep doing that over and over again, because like something went viral and it's like really good and they want to keep riding that wave. That's completely fine. I'm just talking about for me specifically, like I just like to kind of get out there and you know get weird with it and do different things.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. I think that there should be more of a openness to experiment. I think there's nothing wrong with finding the art style that may work for you, right? I was like, I think
Right.
that's perfectly okay if you find like, hey, this is the aesthetic that I like, but
Right.
switching up, the way that you do your stories, and the type of gameplay is always very um, interesting. Because I mean, look at we mentioned here, or I mentioned earlier, and I know that just like you, I was like, I was like, they're probably big fans of that old school. But look at the Jordan and the whole team from Puppet Combo. I was like, they have their whole like expanded publisher now with the Black Star video and the Torture Star video and all the stuff like that. But right, but
Hmm.
all their games had a very unique, very similar aesthetic on the way that
Right.
they do their art style, because they love that PSX, dirty, ugly kind of aesthetic that we all just know and can recognize, but enjoy it. But each game that they put out is so different in the way that they do it, whether it's from the interactivity, from their puzzles, from hey, are we gonna do a third person? Where are you gonna do a first person, and everything else. So I think that is another key aspect, is that you experiment with both the look and the feel and the style, whereas some people are just like, hey, we have a look that works for us, but yeah, we'll
Right.
experiment with every type of genre or gameplay mechanic or whatever we can come up with in between. And I love that, because it really goes to show how far things have come, um, uh, as developers and as fans, because now you think that a lot of the developers that are coming out are fans of these old school projects or everything else. So you're taking everything that you grew up playing, everything that you grew up seeing, and you're wanting to completely redo things in your own way. And I think that's going to stand out because now whoever plays your stuff, 10, 15 years down the line, maybe they're like, hey, you know what? I remember this game that I played. I was like, and I'm going to use that as inspiration for what I do next. And I love
Right,
the way
right.
that they just cycles the creative aspect nonstop, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I mean, I think for a lot of indie devs, it's definitely easier to kind of like have an artistic style that is a little more simplified, just because like it's really expensive to get like high fidelity models made and stuff like that, right? And then you have like all these other games that are like literally just asset flips, from like the Unity store or the Unreal store. So I'll always like champion games that try to create their own assets and create their own monsters or have their own art and stuff like that, as opposed to using like AI generated stuff. You know, so like I've always had mad respect for Puppet Combo and pretty much all the games that they put out, just because they're obviously not the most graphically like beautiful games, but just the storytelling and like the vibes that they create, the atmosphere. It's all original, and it's always something that is I've loved playing. I've loved watching other people play it, and it's definitely been a huge influence for me in my PSX stuff. I try not to do like a direct one-to-one copy with them, because I feel like as far as my PlayStation style games like Flesh Made Fear and the Skin Stapler, like graphic fidelity speaking, it's kind of like leaning more into like a PS2 aesthetic as far as like the texture resolutions and like the poly count on the 3D models and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think Puppet Combo is definitely like more directly in that like PS1 style, with very low poly counts and very low texture resolutions. So like I'm not trying I like when I'm doing that aesthetic, I'm trying to maybe uh bump it up a little bit, just so that like I'm not directly doing exactly what they're doing, but obviously it's heavily inspired by them. And I'll always tell anybody who asks that like who's your favorite modern day game dev, I'm always like Puppet Combo for sure, because I mean that's exactly the kind of stories I like, is like they're because they got the whole slasher thing going on too, right? That's like story speaking, like that. All their games are like really kind of like 80s 90s campy horror driven, which is
Straight,
definitely the vibe that I'm
straight
trying to create.
B movie horror, like not necessarily like
Exactly,
grindhouse,
exactly.
but straight B horror. And I was like, and I love it because you had like Murder House, you had the Power Drill Massacre, which is probably one of the
Hmm.
most insane ones. Obviously, you had the Nun Massacre, Night Ripper, all those games that they
Yeah,
done. I was like, so it is one of those things where that they really
yeah.
did just lean into it.
I'd really wish that Puppet Combo, like the dev behind that, would make some new games. I know that like Jordan is pretty much taken over like that creative aspect of kind of making new Puppet Combo s games, because he's kind of like under the umbrella of Puppet Combo, because he's like publishing all of Jordan's games. But I would really like to see like a new game from Puppet Combo proper, right?
Yeah.
Not like a published dev, which is really, I know I love Jordan's games. I think Jordan's games are great, and it definitely has like the same vibes as Puppet Combo. But I would love to see a new game from Puppet Combo directly, just because
Yeah.
it's been quite a few years. It would be nice to have a new game from them. I think State of the House. How many years it's been since State of the House came out? Probably like
I
I
think
feel
of
like four,
I
3 or 4 years now.
think four. I think Stay Out of the House was the last one that they did, and I think that one came out in 22.
Yeah, it's been quite a few years, so I'd really like to see something new, just because I'm such a fan, and I just
Yeah,
uh
yeah. Stay Out of the House came out in 22. I was like,
yeah, it's
so,
been
and
I know that he's just been busy like porting all his games to console, which obviously is very time consuming. So maybe
Oh,
once he's done getting everything ported, he can
well, I was
actually
like, not only
get
that,
back
you
in.
also got to think that he's also been busy with the night shift. I was like,
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the
uh,
film.
with their film, yeah. I was like, and speaking of John Wolfe being one of the those creators, I know he's been involved in that
Right.
project too. So I was
Yeah.
like, I know, you know, Puppet Combo has probably been so focused on the porting process and working with their publisher and going through that, and then you know, obviously when you're going to consoles, there's a little bit more of a rigorous testing on getting everything approved in that process. So I mean,
Yeah.
he's probably been pulled that way, which is the good thing about, you know, their relationship with Jordan and all the games that they've been able to help put out with that. But I do agree that, you know, going from, you know, Nun Massacre, Power Drill Massacre, and Stay Out of the House, to what Jordan does, which I mean, I am happy that he has his own, you know, umbrella underneath that with the Torture Star video and all that stuff here, so you can tell that separation, right?
Right.
But it would be great to see Puppet Combo, once all this is done, really come back in and do something new and get real excited for all that here.
Yeah. I mean, he's the one who started it all, right? You know, he's like the originator of kind of like bringing back
That
that
retro,
PSX
yeah,
aesthetic. You know,
that
so he. I
whole
mean,
the feel, and like you said, I was like, that's what makes it crazy, is that we've seen so much love now for retro horror, and that genre, even if it's not just that necessarily that aesthetic, but just that whole era, because you have
right.
games coming out, like from for those who don't know, I'm very good with friends over at Malformation Games. They came out with Ground Zero, which is basically
Mm.
Korean Resident Evil. You have the devs over there who what's the other big one that just recently came out? The team over there that made Tormented Souls, very much a Resident Evil, Silent Hill style game,
Right.
but you know, obviously more modern day, high, you know, high resolutions, all that stuff like that. But that that era of games has been on such a big uptick in the past couple years, and you could see a lot of it was after like the blowing up of Puppet Combo and their insane B horror, you know, slasher feel, to just going, hey, you know what, we're just gonna be ridiculous with this and just go from there.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, everybody is just copying Puppet Combo at this point, you know,
That's where
including
it all.
including including myself. Like, you know, we're all just, you know, we're all just Puppet Combo fans.
I was like, Puppet Combo's fans are just Puppet Combo. It's just like him with a mustache. He's just like, I am my own fan.
Right.
I love that. I was like, and I think that's the beauty about the especially on the indie side of game dev, is that everyone knows everyone and is just like, oh man, I love these games, and stuff like that. And you see where everyone kind of takes inspiration from each other, and what even inspired others, and be like, hey, you know what, I love this dev, so I wanted to do something, you know, inspired
Right.
by what they made, and you know, it's so cool to just see that.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely better to just, you know, be cool with everybody as opposed to just being like outright trying to like accuse each other of blatantly copying each other or something like that. Like, you know, we're all part of this kind of, you know, everything has been done before. Kind of everybody is copying everybody. There's hardly any originality left in the world. I don't think there's any originality left in the world, to be honest. It's all just kind of rehashing of different things, but maybe with like a new spin on it, right? But it's all got some kind of, you can look at something else as being like, oh, okay, well, you got this idea from that, or oh, this is obviously inspired by this, you know. So it's like it, like, why get caught up on in like a situation where, you know, you're letting your ego kind of take the front seat and be like, oh well, I did this and I did that, so, you know,
All this is
everybody.
because of me, and this, that, and the third.
Exactly, exactly. So I'll always firmly be in the camp where we should be like building each other up, not tearing each other down, kind of a situation, right?
Absolutely, and I think that when everyone, you know, inspires everyone to always do something different or try something more, I think that's what allows the industry as a whole and the creative process to grow. And especially for this genre of video games, right? I was like, horror is such a unique genre in gaming because you have to have such an appreciation for what it takes to make good horror. And I think that's where a lot of people get confused because sometimes people can make something, horror related, and then there's just no essence to it because you could tell that they're just
Yeah.
they're just throwing tropes or anything in there that they're like, oh, hey, this is what's popular, we can make something out of that. And
Right.
it doesn't have the same feel as someone who understands the themes that go into horror, because
Hmm.
you have the horror games that are really thought provoking or have a lot of symbolism and a lot of stylistic choices. I mean, look at what we played growing up. You had games like the Clock Tower series, right? Probably one of the most prominent that a lot of people might remember from that era. Then you have games that cause controversy, right? Like Rule of Rose and everything in here.
Right.
That has a lot of symbolism and things like that. Or even talking about horror and coming from a Japanese developer, look at Haunting Ground, probably one of the most remembered but also like forgotten horror game that came from Capcom. I was like, that
Hmm.
one had so much like thought provoking symbolism and ways that they presented it, because of the fact that it wasn't your traditional style of horror. I was like, as each character that you interacted with in that game stood for a different aspect. And I was like, and the thing about it is that every aspect that was being entailed was humanistic in a certain point. So it shows that there was a lot of very intense focus and a lot of like real care that went into the way that they presented all that. And I think that's what makes horror stand out. Because if you don't
Right.
get that, same with even anything that's based on folklore or supernatural, is like you still have to understand the concept you're trying to portray and what makes it something scary, especially when you look at a lot of foreign uh, horror games. We talk about, Asia. A lot of Southeast Asian developers are making really great horror titles that are based on, folklore or anything like that. You have a lot of the ones coming out of, Thai. You have a lot of Taiwanese horror. We've seen Korean and all that here, and a lot of those really focus on, hey, you know what? There's this story that's supernatural or anything like that, and explain why that's scary, or really kind of delve into it because they have such an understanding of it and it shows so well.
Right. I mean, like, honestly, I think that probably carries over to like anything creatively speaking. Like, people are going to easily identify when something doesn't have passion in it, right? Or doesn't have any kind of like care. Even if you're making something goofy, you there's still like you can tell when someone is actually like honestly trying to create something that is genuine to what they're what the goal is of the project, whether it be like horror or comedy, right? There's always going to be like you look at like I don't know, like friend slop games, right? And there's obviously people who are just trying to like cash in on the whole like friend slop genre, right? And there's it's very hit or miss, right? Because there's usually some games that will take off that have like a genuinely good idea, that have like something that's very engaging that people can latch onto, and then you just have like a sea of other ones that are just like trying to hop on the bandwagon because they think you're gonna make a quick buck. So it's always in my book, I think it's better to just when you're approaching anything creatively, to just do it genuinely and with passion, as opposed to maybe not focus so much on what you think is going to be the most successful or what's going to make you the most money the quickest way possible or something like that. You know?
Oh, without a doubt. And I think that that's where it goes, because yeah, like you said, a lot of people could tell when something's made just to be made and not really have any sort of um, sentiment or passion behind it. But I think there's definitely certain games where you can kind of get away with that, where people will just
Mhm.
kind of buy into it. But I think when it comes to horror, that's what that in my opinion is probably one of the most unique um, eras, because of the fact that to really get it, you have to have that passion for it. Because anyone could say something scary, but if you can't convey really why it's scary and really show someone, then it's not going to be necessarily scary to other people.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
All right. Well, I appreciate you sitting down with me and talking for so long, Michael. I was like, truly, I appreciate it here and letting everyone get to know a lot about your past projects. So before we get out of here, I want to know if you can say anything here. Obviously, for those who don't know, you can go and play the demo for the skin stapler right now. But do you have like any sort of like estimation on when people may be able to get their hands onto the full game or anything like that?
Yeah, we're I don't have like a specific date, but we're shooting for like early to mid August. So somewhere around then, I'm sure probably within the next month or two, I'll know for sure, and we'll have like a date selected specifically for the release. But that's like the time frame and period that we're looking for is like early to mid August.
All right. Well, guys, y'all heard it here. Be looking for at the tail end of your summertime to be looking out for the full release potentially of the skin stapler. So if you haven't, guys, make sure you go and follow Michael on all his platforms. I know obviously you can follow him on Twitter. Do you have an Instagram or anything else where they can find you at?
Yeah, if you just go to like either my Steam page or like even if you go on Twitter, there should be links to all my other socials on that stuff too. So
All
you
right,
should be
guys.
able to find me anywhere
All
on
right,
there.
well, there you go, guys. Go follow him, Tainted Pact Games, and that's Pact Games over there on Twitter, and follow him on all his socials. He's an absolute superstar, and I appreciate him coming and talking about a lot of his projects. So I know hopefully we'll see you again after the game launches and whatever you got planned next after that.
Yeah, for sure, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
No, no, thank you so much for taking the time. Well, until next time, guys, I was like, this has been another wonderful interview with such an amazing person. So I'll be seeing you all in the next one. Until then, make sure you have a wonderful rest of y'all's evening, morning, afternoon, day, night, whatever time it is for you. Have a wonderful one. Till then, peace out and check you later, everyone.